Chief said that now they're talking. They made a commitment, which it's really bad. I mean, it's.
Well, for the two top law enforcement guys not to have talked for months in itself is kind of bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah, with all due respect to the chief, I mean, his silence added to this. He was silent way too long. This was not something that happened overnight. We all know. I mean, there's this undergirding of this, disagreement and lack of support for the DA. For good reason. None of law enforcement supported him for his reelection bid. And for the arrogance of him saying, you guys, I mean, he starts his town hall meeting by saying, you guys reelected me twice. It was like, well, no. A party domination in this city reelected you twice. I don't think anybody reelected you specifically, but you happened to be on the ticket because he got the same votes that every other Democrat got. I mean, it's not like he got any more votes. It's not like all the Democrats lost and then he won, or he got substantially more votes. I mean, let's just call balls and let's just call it for what it is. And that's not a shot on our city. I mean, I think so many people in our city don't agree with what's happening with these ideas, but they're kind of stuck to a label. And I know that because I walked through all that for years. And again, there's just an honest conversation that needs to be had with everyone in Bexar County and San Antonio and saying, okay, what set of ideas, forget about labeling those ideas. What set of ideas do we want to govern our community for our children and grandchildren? And that's the kind of talk that I like to have with people.
Well, now that we're talking about guns, I think it might have been right after we finished the show last Saturday that the governor of New Mexico issued a 30-day suspension of open and concealed carry in New Mexico.
Albuquerque.
And then I think they have amended it to allow firearms in most public places. And I thought to myself, how can a governor do that? And people seem people seem to be blaming the guns as usual.
Oh gosh, please let's dissect that because I get I have an autoimmune response when it comes to that about blaming an object for the misuse of the object. We don't do that with cars. We don't do that with alcohol. We do that with nothing else in our society but guns. And yes, if guns can be misused, there can be problems. And I'm a huge advocate for gun safety and training and responsible gun ownership, legal gun ownership. But alcohol, are you kidding me? There's almost triple the deaths in alcohol-related incidents. This is objective data than guns, including suicides. And we can go over that kind of data. I mean, because she does that because she's been taught that she can. During this COVID stuff, all she learned from that experiment was like all you have to do is just claim an emergency, and then anything, all bets are off. It's an emergency, so you have no free speech. It's an emergency, you have no free ability to worship. It's an emergency, you can't gather. It's an emergency, you can't have a business. That's what we've taught ourselves, and we've allowed it. That's why it's always deeper than the symptom, and we've cautioned against that and this cancel culture and all this other crap we're dealing with. So. Yeah, we can dissect that too. Sorry, George. Are you here?
You're stealing my thunder.
It's my birthday rant. Sorry about that.
I'm completely out of a job. This guy said all the right things at all the right time. What else is there to say? No, seriously. I mean, you stole my thunder. It's the idea that the COVID emergency, COVID hysteria was the opening act to something greater. This isn't a one-off. It's not like they pushed our luck. The American citizens pushed back. It will never happen again. They learned their lesson. No, actually, they were rather successful, and they're going to do this over and over and over again in the name of a public emergency. And this is very typical of leftward thinking. You strike fear into the population, and then you exploit that fear to strip individuals of their rights. And at the end of the day, you want to get thanked for that. So we're going to strip you of your rights, and you should be happy. And this is a precedent. And what she's doing is actually quite brilliant. It worked the first time. Why not do it again? There's an attorney by the name of Phil Holloway, and he put an interesting tweet out, and I thought he said it right. It was well condensed. He started out by saying that, of course, he said New Mexico governor is suspending open concealed carry in Albuquerque in the name of a public emergency. And he said, look, this person is a tyrant. Michelle Grisham is a tyrant, the New Mexican governor. And he elaborated. He said, quote, if she thinks she can take away your rights in a so-called emergency, then she'll always find an emergency to use as an excuse for tyranny. It's never going to end. It's perpetual. Now, people push back and say, man, she's an idiot. I can't believe she did that. And, of course, the federal judge stepped in, a Biden-appointed judge of all things, and struck it down. But But notice what she said afterward. She thought, that's okay. This has created dialogue. This is just an opening act, basically. This is basically an intro. Now we're talking about it. What she's saying, this is becoming more normalized. So the fact that we're talking about it, and the world hasn't burned down, and I blew off a whole constitutional right, and this is all the flack that I'm getting, not bad. Not bad for a week's work. It's all very deliberate.
Instead of repenting from it,
yeah, right,
and being embarrassed for doing this, that's George's spot on. This is the testing of the waters. I mean, we can allow them to shut down businesses. We can allow them to tell us what to do with our kids. We can allow them to, we can tell them you can't show up to a school board. They can tell you when to worship or not worship. I mean, think about what's going on here. And that's why I say you don't have a right unless you exercise it. You don't have muscles or brains unless you exercise it. So our rights are no different. So this is all testing waters that they've been shown works.
Okay, so we talk about guns in Bexar County. We're talking about guns in Albuquerque, New Mexico. But is it my imagination that China may be building up their military, whether it's guns or some other type of weapon, to prepare for a war against the United States? There's so much rumbling now about China and what they're doing. And I keep on thinking, are we marching in the direction locally, United States and even worldwide, in going toward war?
This is George's wheelhouse. So we're gonna unleash George on this topic, but it's not rumblings, it's doings. Yeah. They're doing things. I mean, they're positioning themselves. They're showing disrespect and disdain for the United States. They've let their intent know that they want to be the leading world power, and they're doing something about it. They're collecting information on TikTok. Their espionage capability makes Russians look like amateurs, and they're definitely better than us. They know that Joe Biden is a joke. I mean, I'm not being disrespectful because I don't like using names to description, but he's a joke. I mean, he's at some meeting in Vietnam or wherever he was over there, and said, I'm going to go to bed, and it's embarrassing. Yeah. It's embarrassing and it's sad at the same time. Sad for the Biden family, regardless of what you feel about them, regardless of how you think of Hunter, and he's a really piece of work, regardless of you think about, whatever, anybody, it's still sad to see a man in his older age be used the way he's being used and not to be given the dignity, whether you think he deserves it or not, of that old age. It's embarrassing for the country. It's embarrassing as a United States citizen. He is the president of the United States. Act like it. Your name is on the, so regardless of how he got there, he's the president. It's embarrassing and it's a joke. And there's not one person, there's not one enemy that we have that is intimidated by this man or the people that are underneath him. It's a culture. It's the way we do things now in America. We're just talking about that with guns, with emergencies, and now with leadership or lack thereof in DA's offices. Can you see where this is going? This is not a one-off in any one of these areas. It's a joke. I mean, and China's serious. If we think they're not serious, you're going to wake up soon realizing difference. And that's not a doom and gloom statement. That's just, again, I can see what's in front of me. And I know George has a lot to say on this topic.
Well, I want to piggyback on that. We can see what's in front of us. And hopefully one of the benefits of this show is that we try to talk about things that nobody else is talking about. And in a different way, in a unique way. There are things that are right in front of us that we refuse to talk about and engage in a serious manner. And hopefully that's one of the benefits that Sidebar brings, because the perception, the name Sidebar is almost like I see it as a play on words, Nico, because you described it last week, a sidebar topic assigned, a court of law is something you kind of take off to the side and discuss, maybe among attorneys, maybe involves the judge. But it could be a very critical issue. It's not a secondary issue. It could have primary import. And that's kind of how I see the China topic. We know it's out there. People have a general awareness that we should be concerned, but we're not really seriously engaging it. There are very, very few people having serious conversations about it. I listen a lot to Gordon Chang. He lived in China for 20 years, the China policy expert. I think he is, he's a member of a think tank. I'm trying to remember the name of the think tank right now. I don't know if it's the Brookings Institution. But he does formal work on this, and he writes publicly on it, and he's a commentator on some really great shows. And of course, Michael Pilbury, who's a great scholar. He's been doing scholarly work on China, and he's been working in an official capacity in terms of Chinese policy for 50 years. These guys are really important voices. I don't know I don't know how many people are aware of this, but the United States government is asleep at the wheel, and we better wake the hell up.
Okay, we are going to take a break, and hopefully we're going to continue with China. It's coming up next on Sidebar.
With Reputation.
Please know that we are on live, and you can find all of the platforms at sidebartv.com during this show. And then afterwards, sidebartv.com. If you didn't join us live during the show, you can join us for the 45 minutes, an hour afterwards also. When you talk about China and they're building their military to prepare for a potential war with the U.S., in my mind, I think, what kind of war would it be? One, we have really no modern experience with war. And is it going to be the war that we saw in Vietnam or Korea? Or is it going to be some kind of war that's, I believe, already assembling here in America with all of the different
the key to winning a war like that is to weaken your enemy before you attack. And you don't think that we
can put a check box by that.
We've looked at the 4 stages of ideological subversion by Yuri Bezmenov before, but China's taken that and put that on steroids. I mean, so our moral compass is deranged. So you demoralize them, destabilize them, you have a crisis, and then you normalize them again. And to George's point earlier, the normalization is like, oh, I'm glad we're having this discussion. We've normalized this stripping of rights. We've normalized insanity. We've normalized an open border. They're trying to, and people are pushing back, thank God. But I mean, there's no excuse for that. I mean, to think that the United States of America, that maybe we shouldn't be the leading world power then. Hand it over to somebody else that can take care of their own borders. That the United States of America cannot stop illegal immigrants from walking across our borders. What if they had guns in their hands, these guns that they're so afraid of? What if they had COVID? Is COVID they're so afraid of? What if they weren't wearing masks because none of them are wearing masks, that these masks that everybody has to wear? What if they're driving tanks? You think that they're going to be easier to stop with tanks versus just them walking with a backpack and some new Nikes? I mean, it's a bunch of BS. I mean, this is insane. How do you not look? I mean, I was always hesitant to say this is intentional and all the conspiracy theorists out there. I mean, how do you not look at the insanity at the border, which Democrats and Republicans that are having to live in that crap are complaining against? Can we forget the labels for a second? What do I do with these 20 people in my backyard? What do we do with our school system? What do we do with our budgets? What do we do with the trash in the street? Meaning, because there's going to be, you can't pick up enough, when they eat and stuff like that. What do you do with all these things? This is not a political party issue. It shouldn't be, at least. How do you not look at that and say this is intentional? Well, you don't think China's influenced all this? Fentanyl, over 100,000 deaths with fentanyl, but we're worried about, all these other things, impeaching Donald Trump and all this other stuff, and parents at school boards and domestic terrorism. Domestic terrorism, whatever that means, is more serious of a threat to the United States than that, than China, than espionage, than taking information, than stealing our secrets, all of that. I mean, it's a joke. And anyone that's complacent really has to, if you're a prayerful person, pray about it. Really think deep about what are you trying to accomplish. Again, I go back to the tribalism. Is it just about your tribe winning? Or do we want to agree on a set of ideas? Let's debate those ideas. Let's talk about them. And let's implement some of your ideas may be good. Some of my ideas better be good. But we better agree on a moral compass or else we're done. And we're getting closer and closer to that.
And you have to recognize the threat. And that's the point. If you don't do the things that Nico's talking about, you're never going to recognize the threat and engage the threat seriously, and we're just simply not. I keep coming back to this Vietnam trip. Nico and I were chatting last night about it. And it was really telling. I mean, this is the trip, of course, right after the G20 meeting in India, in New Delhi, India. He comes off the G20 meeting. He flies to Vietnam.
Biden.
Yeah, and he flies to Vietnam in the name, of course, greater cooperation between the two nations, the United States of America and Taiwan, a bunch of platitudes, et cetera. And then he's asked a question about China. And this is the same meeting, you remember, where he said he had to go to sleep, right? Because he was tired and needed to go to sleep.
I wasn't joking. I mean,
Yeah.
That's literally what he said. I got to go to bed. Okay, thanks. But I digress. So they asked him questions about China, and he was just completely unserious about it. He says, "Look, I'm not really going to get involved in. We're not trying to isolate China. We're not trying to contain China. Are you kidding me? There is a naive in between him and Tony Blinken, because you got to go back now. Go back to the earlier meeting that we saw earlier this year. If you remember, it was during the Father's Day weekend, and Tony Blinken was in Beijing. And if you look at his visit to Beijing, and if you look at Trump's visit to Beijing, I think it was in 2018. I mean, it couldn't be any more glaringly different. And it's a statement by the CCP.
Because I don't assume that everybody saw that. Because when you said that last night, I wasn't thinking of it the way you were meaning it. So explain the difference between Trump's visit and Blinken's.
No, and I think the only guy out there who I think does any service to this type of analysis, I think, is Gordon Chang, because he understands the Chinese culture. I believe he's half Chinese, and he understands it from a number of levels, certainly personally. But he says, look, the Chinese care a lot about symbolism. We don't care about that kind of stuff. We're clueless as, I was going to say, farts in the wind. But we just don't plug in at that level. And what happened was, if you look at, this was going on even before he went over there, where we got a foreign minister basically warning the Secretary of State to have respect for Chinese interests. He says it's a warning before he even gets there. He gets there. There's nobody at the airport. You got maybe one Chinese official. Tony Blinken arrives in Beijing, one Chinese official. Xi Jinping's nowhere to be found. He meets with a foreign minister that's considerably below him in rank, spends a ton of time with this guy. This guy has no leverage relative to Blinken. And then he meets, finally, with his counterpart, basically the top diplomat in China. And then he finally, about 30 minutes before he's supposed to meet with Xi Jinping, finally gets a notification that Xi Jinping has agreed to meet with him. They spend about 30 to 35 minutes together. And when you account for the amount of time for translation, they maybe got about 13 to 14 minutes. At the end of the day, everything Tony Blinken would go over to talk about, which is all the things that we should be talking about, issues regarding Taiwan, issues regarding transportation, or I should say exportation, of fentanyl to Mexico that then ends up in the United States. Like you said, 100,000 American deaths. A lot of that fentanyl comes from China. All those kinds of issues. Issues of military espionage. Incursions into the American markets. United States universities. Confucius Institutes. Those kinds of things that Americans really are concerned about. Confucius Institutes are basically institutes that are set up in American universities that facilitate basically propaganda efforts into American academic institutions. It's a way of shaping the American mind in favor of communist China. I mean, there's a mountain of concerns that are paramount. China's Belt and Road Initiative, the idea that they're gaining access to foreign ports at the speed of light. Predatory loans. They'll go into Africa. They'll go into impoverished nations, and they'll know those nations have zero chance of paying back loans. So what they'll do is they'll say, we'll give you a crap ton of money at backbreaking interest. And if you default, that's okay. You don't need to pay us back. But here's how you, in terms of money, but here's how you pay us back. Give us interest. Give us governing interest. Give us control over your infrastructure. We want your port. Now, why does that matter? Because you go to a coastal nation with a port and you allow the communist China, the Chinese Communist Party to basically set up a de facto naval port in another nation. This has happened a lot.
Karen, can you see what's going on here?
I do, but
this is long ball.
None of this was addressed by Blinken.
But in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, I get it. I read about it. But at the same time, when I'm on Instagram, I see people who still say they're going to vote for Biden. and I still see people that say orange man bad. I still see that to this day. It's current. And so for you to give all of that truth, and it is truth, it's not hypothesis, I wonder if that stuff sinks into the average American mind.
Look, when the pain of staying the same exceeds the pain of changing, then you change. Pain is a great motivator. And
That's right.
It's a shame. I pray, I literally pray. I pray that this country has felt enough pain. I do. Because then we won't change. We're just not going to change. I mean, look, these people that you say that, they would not hesitate voting for the best surgeon for their kid. They don't care their politics. To me, it's that. Because Trump irritated me personality-wise, and he still does. And you know me, I call it out, and I get pissed off at him, and I'll say this is what I like, this is what I don't like. But people like that, they're either looking at it through a lens that wants to justify. It's confirmation bias. They want to confirm. It's like we look at this impeachment on Paxton. We can look at that in a little while, or maybe after in the after show. I mean, the closing arguments couldn't have been so different. I mean, you have the same evidence, and that's typical in a trial, by the way. But you're just talking about people that are looking at things completely different, and so that's when those type of people are voting for these same ideas. Forget about Biden. Forget about Trump. You're not voting for the candidate. You're voting for the ideas the candidate's trying to implement.
Exactly.
That's really what the political partisanship's about. Partisanship to me is a platform to instill ideas for your community. That's it. It's a roadway to instill ideas. And so which ideas do you want to run your country and your community and your state and all that other stuff? And I really try to reason with people in the arena of ideas, because you're right. This the tribalistic mindset, this confirmation bias. And I've had debates with friends that I love dearly that you should hear, and maybe conservatives do the same thing, by the way. I mean,
you're right.
They defend no matter what. The tribe has to win. I want to hang out in ideas and principles. We got to talk about ideas and principles that undergird those ideas, or else we're never going to move forward as a nation, as United States.
And so you talked about different types of theaters of war. I think what Nico's talking about, this is all non-kinetic. They talk about in terms of non-kinetic and kinetic approaches to war. Kinetic is when things get hot and are actually leading a military operation. Whether it's naval, by air or by land. I think what we're seeing now is just a long period of non-kinetic strategies against the United States, and the United States security apparatus seems to be wholly incapable of doing anything about it. Nico's talking about the exportation of ideas. America's doing a super crappy job exporting its ideas. We don't do that. First of all, you have to be proud of the ideas that you espouse and that you hold to be able to export them. We're not even proud of that. I mean, you look at whatever poll you want, and you're going to see that patriotism in the United States is in the basement.
It's a shame, man.
And we have a whole apparatus from the United States government to academic institutions that are teaching people to hate themselves, whereas China's doing the exact opposite. The level of hubris, the level of pride in the country. I mean, you're talking about enlisting espionage efforts at the lowest level of the population. We have thousands of people that are blowing off our borders, to Nico's earlier point of our border, that are Chinese nationals. We have at least 10,000 by the latest reports. These people disappear into the American interior. We have illegal incursions into military bases by Chinese nationals. This is documented. The Wall Street Journal put out a report on September 4th saying that there's been at least 100 plus incidents of Chinese nationals finding their way into military bases. How does that happen, Karen?
But that's an assembly of an army. Why can't people see that?
Right. These are the seeds to a military incursion.
Well, because they've been.
And we're delusional if we think
they're delusional. I mean, their mind has been.
That can't happen in America.
Has been
Is
hijacked.
that it?
I mean, go back to that interview in 1984 with Yuri Bezmenov. He says when the American mind has been so infiltrated, so to speak, that you can say that something is blue and it's white, and they say no, it's not blue. That's not
exactly
blue.
Right.
They redefine the color of blue. They redefine definitions, so the vocabulary is the same, but the definitions are different. That's what we're getting to in this country. And look, China's playing long ball. This is not. I mean, they're not thinking I got to win tomorrow. They're thinking generationally, and they've been working on this for a long time. We are behind the eight ball here, and so for George's point earlier, you didn't explain Trump's entrance and when he went there. I mean, it was a pomp and circumstance deal.
Yeah, we'll continue on the other side,
absolutely.
but we'll get into some of that symbolism, Nico, because I think that is important. It was a huge shot across the bow, and we missed it.
Remember, you can see this live us in the studio, all you have to do is go to sidebartv.com, and don't forget, stay with us after the show. We'll be right back. Go to sidebartv.com. There's a place where you can contribute, because we definitely would love to have you on as one of our sponsors. And you can always join us after the show. Sidebartv.com. That's where you can find all of the links to where we are. And Salo's not here, but it's Facebook Live, Instagram, and what else? Twitter. Or X. Quit calling it Twitter.
Why'd they change the name anyway?
Because Elon changed it, because
Why?
It's his company now.
I know, but why? Just
Because it's Elon Musk. He has a son or a daughter named X, I think it is.
Oh, my.
And that's his whole, like, SpaceX.
I mean,
That's the theme.
oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
makes
the
more
theme.
sense now.
Okay, I think I sent y'all a video last week. It was Trump, and he actually became emotional when he was talking about America. And
I didn't.
well, I'll have to send it to you. He was giving a speech and just talking about how he loves America. And he stopped because he couldn't go on one more word without getting emotional because of the situation in America now.
Trump got emotional?
Trump.
No.
It's true.
Yes.
It's true.
What do you think? Wow.
I mean, the guy adores the country, and he's genuinely grateful for the opportunities it's provided him.
It was real.
And he gets it.
It was real. He couldn't say another word.
You know, I don't doubt that. You know, because think about what the counter argument has to be. The counter argument has to be such a power monger, and he's so hubris and arrogant that he would risk everything and all the attention he had before to get more attention. And I mean, because you have to think, I look at motives for a living. So I have to look at motive. What drives an individual? And so, you know, Trump is a complex person. We've talked about that before. His personality is charming, you know, appealing and irritating all at the same time, which is probably most people, but he's on, you know, he's extreme. But you know, I wouldn't doubt that. What's the motive behind him? Why would he risk it all? In his
And
health?
go to jail.
Yeah, risk it all. Well, he didn't know he was going to do that. He probably undergirded. He probably thought that could happen, but to think it could really happen is another. But yeah, why would he risk it all? I mean, it has to be something like that. That doesn't surprise me.
And
I want to see it though.
Yeah, I will send it. You were also saying that the reception that Trump got when he went to China versus the Biden administration,
I remember,
was way different.
He is unabashedly in love with the United States of America, and he projects that everywhere he goes, whether he's at a rally or whether he's in Beijing. And he's completely unapologetic about it, and he's proud of it. And you want to talk about what Nico's talking about, the notion of exporting ideas. I mean, he is the point of the spear in that regard. And so, yeah, I mean, you could see a clear contrast, and the Chinese respect that. Because whatever you say about Trump, there's an element of that craziness. He's predictably unpredictable.
Yeah.
And the Chinese respect that. They fear that because they don't know what to expect next. Trump shows up in 18. Blinken shows up in 23. And it's a stark difference. He shows up, barely anybody at the airport. He's just some dude, basically, showing up at an airport.
Well, Blinken acts like some dude. He doesn't act like anybody.
Yeah, and they treated him like that. You're just some dude. And like I said, I already talked about how he was dealing with people that were sort of below his rank. You contrast that with Pompeo's visit. Pompeo also, of course, being the former Secretary of State.
I like Mike.
Since we're comparing apples with apples here. But you look at when Pompeo visited, very different. Who did Pompeo meet with when he visited Beijing? He met with Xi Jinping. You look at that meeting, you look at the aesthetics of it, and it's night and day relative to what happened with Blinken. If you look at the meeting between Pompeo and Xi Jinping, they're sitting right next to each other, separated by maybe a 21-inch coffee table. There's water on there, there's some tea, and they're talking side by side. What's the message? We're equals. Xi Jinping is the general secretary of the Chinese Communist Party. Mike Pompeo is the Secretary of State. Technically, you've got a person lower on the rung in terms of American federal government with the president of China, if you will. That says something. Blinken reversed that. That meeting, you've got Xi Jinping at the end. He's the chairman. He's the boss. He's at the end of a table, and you've got Blinken sitting like a peon 2 or 3 seats down. What's the message there? Tony Blinken is wholly subservient to Xi Jinping. Totally different message. But this is not lost on the Chinese. But this Americans couldn't care less. We're too buried in our phones.
The exude weakness. I mean, and again, you look at the day here, exudes weakness. I mean, this is not a one-off. This is almost like their MO. I mean, as if there's something shameful about being strong. And meekness is not weakness. It's just strength under control. Chivalry. I mean, the Chinese love, I mean, the idea of strength is something that governs that culture. They're not into weak things.
But let's continue with that, because there's a clear difference in strategy and ideology here. These are different religions, if you will. The American left actually believes that China's our ally. They actually believe that China's our friend. They actually believe that China is mutually interested in cooperation. They actually believe that nonsense. Now, there's a few of them who know better, but it doesn't matter, because it's leading to the downfall of the country, and that's a higher axiom for them. Whatever leads to the downfall of the United States, they're going to knock the United States down a couple of orders, on the influence poll. And that's fine. Even though China's nasty, even though they might know that China's nasty, China's got imperialistic tendencies, even though they know that, they hate the United States more. And this kind of disdain for their own country is what we've been projecting. And I guess the point of our conversation this morning, Nico, is that China's strategy is to deny, to keep talking about cooperation, to keep doing basically what Blinken says. Let's just keep dialoguing. So basically, Tony Blinken took a very long and expensive trip to go and dialogue. He could have done that over a phone call. They simply dialogued. And the point is, this is very much in the Chinese military's interest, because the more we dialogue, the more we engage in alleged cooperation, we're doing absolutely nothing. We're maintaining status quo. And while this government is going after American civil liberties, the Chinese Communist Party is developing military technologies, stealing American corporate technology. So if you want to do business in the American mainland and you want to actually have a company there, you have to agree to hand over technical information. you have to agree to hand over proprietary information. There's no such daylight between the Chinese Communist Party and the civic sector. It's one and all. Every single Chinese citizen is a spy, as the Chinese government sees it. Every single citizen is a spy. The individuals who are engaging in blowing off military entrance gates and coming into, they're all doing the same thing. Oh my gosh, we got lost. I was checking out Google and it brought me here to a McDonald's and a Burger King on this site. I didn't realize that. Sorry, I'm just a tourist. They engage. These are Chinese. This is your average Chinese national. It's happening regularly with great frequency. Every single American Chinese citizen is a very potential Chinese spy. This low-level espionage is frequent. It's predominant. There's no daylight between the civic sector and the military sector. We don't get that.
Right? They have their own problems with their country and their people and their own economy and things of this nature. And we're not exploiting that. We should be exploiting it. We should.
But instead, we're talking about transgenders and toxic masculinity.
But that's related. So you're going to crush your individual. There's no autonomy there. And so you've crushed innovation. You've got an aging population. So the only opportunity that they have to develop is theft. So they're stealing American technological interests. Then they, in the name of cooperation, create these interests, right? These groups of cooperation with American universities and Chinese universities. And you've got this flow of research information. And if you look at what universities are doing, it's almost always a university that has a relationship with the Department of Defense where they're doing military defense research. Where do you think this information is going? There are tons of examples of critical information on missile launch systems, hypersonic missile technology that's being literally lost, leaving American coffers and going to the Chinese military. This is dangerous. This is very dangerous.
Go ahead. Mainstream media has dirty hands in this also. Because if all this stuff was actually revealed and reported on, this wouldn't be an issue. With all the COVID lies, we wouldn't have gone through all that. So one of the main co-conspirators in all this trouble we're having in this country is mainstream media. This idea of quote-unquote journalists that doesn't exist anymore.
That's right.
If they were just call balls and strikes, report the information, let people, hold people in power responsible, which is the purpose of the free press, by the way. That was the whole purpose of it originally, because they didn't have these modes of communication we have now. So we needed the press to say, no, BS, brother, sister, you can't do that. Citizen, the people these people work for you, you need to know what they're doing right and wrong so you can make an educated, well-informed decision. That's not what's happening anymore. Now they're like the marketing arm of this propaganda movement, and it is what it is, because you know that mainstream media has been wrong over and over again about things, but there's no repentance, there's no consequences to it. It's like, try again. Let's try another strategy.
But don't you think that if you don't know what the First Amendment is, or you don't know what the law is, then why would you report it when New Mexico's governor says, okay, no guns?
And that's where the academic system comes in, and this is a multi-pronged attack. Because if you're raising the people that hate this country and don't know what rights they're supposed to be defending, then they hand them over. They start, when they talk about this word eroding, that's what happens, is slow erosion of this knowledge of rights and understanding the power of the people. When you say we the people, if you see that on someone's car, right away people say, oh, there's some weirdo, there's some extremist. What do you mean extremist? Democrats used to say that. The Democrat Party used to be the champion of free speech. What are you talking about? Bill Clinton, as I always bring as an example, in 1995, during the State of the Union address, was railing on illegal immigration, saying it was one of the greatest threats we had to this country. That was a quote-unquote Democrat. What changed? The idea is still the same. The idea is good whether a Democrat says it or a Republican says it or an independent or a Green Party. It's irrelevant. A good idea is a good idea. Let me give you another good idea. Don't jump off a building without a parachute. That's a good idea. I don't care who tells you that advice. It's good. It's good to follow. Do you see my point?
Yes.
And we've lost that mindset, that reasoning, the lot to be able to understand these things.
My question is, did the criminals listen to New Mexico's governor?
Let's talk about that.
Okay. We will continue after this break with more on Sidebar.
With reputation.
WOAI, but afterwards, please join us for the live after show. You can find us by going to sidebartv.com. So we have to talk a little bit about New Mexico's governor, because when I heard what she said about, okay, there's a 30-day ban, I was like, wait a second. You're taking away the rights of those who follow the law, but what about the ones that don't? And the same goes for here in Bexar County.
Yeah, the insanity, and I have to say it, the stupidity of a statement like the DA here in Bexar County said that these shootings on officers is because of the open carry laws or whatever is a lie. I wish he was here. It's a lie. It's either a lie or gross incompetence. Either way, he shouldn't be the DA. That's a rhyme, by the way. And so
get a T-shirt.
Yeah, and so it's an absolute lie. And so the vast majority, if not, I don't want to say a number without being 100% sure, at least half of the people that shot at those 6 officers were either had a case pending or were convicted felons. Guess what? The law says they shouldn't have a gun anyway. So they're not following that law. So why are they going to follow any other BS laws that restrict law-abiding citizens from stopping themselves because we have a right not to be victimized? So it's a joke. It's again passing the blame for lack of leadership and lack of logic and lack of standing for the institution of law enforcement. I mean, any individual law enforcement officer that's wrong or that abuses their authority should be held accountable and given due process like anybody else. We represent a lot of officers that are accused of allegations, many of them falsely accused. It's ridiculous. But the institution of law enforcement is good, and we're seeing that now. This whole crap insanity of defund the police, and now we're seeing what's happening around our country. And all you have to do, Karen, is look at the data in these areas where these ideas have been implemented. We've talked about that on the show before, and they're never working out. So you can blame an object, and this is the only area that we blame the object for the behavior of the individual using the object. And again, you can look at data on alcohol. You can look at data on vehicular crimes and vehicular accidents, and the abuse of vehicles and the abuse of alcohol, and then the abuse of alcohol in vehicles, because they both stand by themselves, and then there's data together. And it almost triples all gun use of violence to include suicide. Suicide should be its own category, but they don't do that. And so this is the only area, and I call BS on that. Now, you don't judge an idea by its abuse, and you don't judge an object by its abuse. You would judge it by the owner, the person that's actually using it. So it's.
But how can you bring up that correlation with a straight face, even if you?
Because they've been taught it works.
Well,
but it has worked. It has worked, and I want to go back to what she said, Nico, because of the way she framed it. It's important to Michelle Grisham. Today, I signed an executive order declaring gun violence a public health emergency. To my fellow citizens, get loud, step up, demand change from your neighbors, from your friends, from your communities, from your elected leaders. Enough is enough. More coming from me tomorrow. Gun violence is a public health emergency. This is happening locally. This isn't new. It's just the latest manifestation. But we had a similar conversation about this when we were talking about how this is a leftward thinking issue. This is typical of the communist left. It happens here in the United States, but it's also happening globally. When the Biden administration decided that they were going to give the World Health Organization the ability to declare a pandemic. What is a pandemic inside the United States, and how we should respond to it? Remember, we were talking about it's not a long leap to say, for them to come in and say that gun violence is a public health emergency, and therefore we are going to declare a pandemic inside the United States, which will give them the ability to basically trump Second Amendment rights. This is all rather networked. What Michelle Grisham is doing, she's not solo on this. It's the latest manifestation, but she's not solo. I wish I could say that Joe Gonzalez was exercising some original thinking when he blamed open carry for the recent surge in shootings. But if you remember in July of 2020, this is a replay. Remember in July of 2020, there was a similar issue in Atlanta. Keisha Lance Bottoms was the mayor of Atlanta, and she was asked by MSNBC, hey, there's been a 124% increase in crimes And she said, well, the reason for that, and he cited coronavirus and isolation, and of course, open carry. Because these individuals are allowed to walk down the street and you can't go after them for probable cause because it's an Atlanta law.
What's probable cause is open carry?
Asked for evidence, no evidence was provided. See, we don't need evidence. All you need is to strike at the emotional. You operate at the emotional level. You don't need to think critically. That's the problem. This is how you lose your rights. You shut your brain off and you feel your way to bondage. And that's what's happening right now. But this is not new. These guys are testing the waters. They're sort of like the Jurassic Park illustration of velociraptors testing a fence. Remember that? The 1993, the initial release? Yeah. That's exactly what's going on here. They're basically looking for weaknesses in the fence. And when they find enough, it'll be a concerted effort and they'll just simply topple it over. Americans are asleep at the wheel, generally speaking, and we really need to wake up. We have to get educated and recognize the criticality of the moment and do something about it. Because you get to a point where it's the point of no return. And this is why we try to pick topics on this show, I think, that are related. People are wondering, what exactly is the relationship between what's happening in New Mexico and the Chinese Communist Party? Folks, it's obviously the same ideology. This is all about total control. It's totalitarianism. There's a domestic front and there's an international front, but it's all the same religion. And the answer is to exercise your rights. That's what's ironic about this. We get to keep our rights by exercising them, but we need to know what the hell they are. And I'm worried, as you're worried, that the ignorance of these rights is staggering. And I think we've never been more vulnerable. So I think the two topics are.
I want you to be
related.
wrong. I really want you to be wrong, but.
But what was that it was Star Trek episode where Shatner's looking, or Captain Kirk's looking at the screen, and he's kind of a melodramatic overactor, and he'd say, "Spock, what is that?" And he's pointing to the screen. I remember Spock comes up to him. He says, "Captain, I admit I don't know." And it was like you could hear a pin drop. Wait, Spock doesn't know something? And it went on to be, there was a lot of actually philosophical truth in Star Trek. And he would say, hey, listen, that's really the first step to wisdom, is the recognition that you don't know something. And I think the American public needs to come to the realization that we're not as educated as we should be. We're not as good stewards of the wonderful blessing of freedoms that we've been given. And we need to arm up by getting educated, by getting our arms around these wonderful gifts, and in doing something about retaining them so that our children can enjoy the blessings you and I have had. And that's what brings us here on Saturday mornings. I mean, we're busy. We got lots of stuff going on, but I worry about my kids. You worry about your kids. You worry about your kids.
Yeah.
That's why I'm here this morning. I'm worried about them being able to enjoy an America that I enjoyed, growing up.
But I think deeper about this gun issue. Why are they trying to disarm people? Why are they trying to disarm the wrong people? When you think about that. And there's so much ignorance when it comes to the Second Amendment and the purpose of it, and where the Second Amendment lies in all the other amendments. And the First Amendment being free speech and free exercise of religion and free ability to gather and air your grievance, free press to hold people in power accountable. Then you have the Second Amendment to stop from tyranny and from your government overstepping and treating you like a peasant and taking your rights and stripping you. The Third Amendment, stopping governmental agencies and groups and armies from gathering in your home. The Fourth Amendment, they're free from unreasonable searches and seizures. They can't just stop you and start probing you and going into you. And the Fifth and Sixth about cross-examination and right to counsel and right to due process. And then you get into this and you think about the logic, and we don't teach our children what these mean and what these rights are and what they represent and why our founding fathers put them in place. Because they wanted this experiment to do well. And they knew that, unless you had angels governing the country, that there needed to be a virtuous people. So there needed to be some checks and balances. And they applied they instituted these checks and balances. And they knew that they needed a virtuous and an educated populace. So they wanted people well-informed, which is why you have free press, right? And to make sure that there's this ability to exchange information. And then this ability not to be a victim from your own government either, Second Amendment, right? So that you can bear arms, and it wasn't for hunting. This is so stupid. I mean, but we allow this misinformation to get out there. And then think about the Third Amendment. No one talks about the Third Amendment. Think about to make it the Third Amendment, what was going on in the country at the time? what was happening, and all the atrocities that were happening once they invaded your home just to kind of set up shop in your home and to take away your autonomy of your property and the right to life, liberty, and this pursuit of happiness. All these amendments and these inalienable rights endowed by a creator, not a government, for us to enjoy and for this experiment to thrive are placed in, are protected by these amendments. When you think about I really got deeper as I got older in studying these things. And our kids aren't taught this way. They're not taught. They're taught to hate this country. And they're judging the country by its abuse. They're judging this country by some horrible agents. Would you judge your life that way? I guarantee you all these people, if they look at the continuum of their life, there's going to be a season in their life that they're embarrassed about. And you say, no, you can't get out of that season. Too bad. I'm going to identify you. I'm going to mark you. I'm going to label you in that season. We don't do that.
Yeah.
'Cause we love the redemption story, but we don't want to call it a biblical idea. This idea of pulling, kind of this overcoming all odds and, David versus Goliath. We used to love those type of stories, but that could only flourish in a country with ideas that give you the platform and the foundation to do that. No one's having the David and Goliath story in China. No one has the rag to riches story in China. It's just a bunch of rags.
They even changed the Bible.
Everything.
Yeah.
Just a bunch of rags. I mean,
you don't have these stories in communist regimes and in China because you don't have this set of idea that undergirds this experiment or this canvas, as I call it, where you can paint your own picture within reason, of course. And so it's always deeper. It's not really about the gun. It's about the ideology that supports your right to bear arms. And the people, this is how they work. The people that they're trying to disarm aren't the people that you're afraid of. Not you and I. They're the people they're afraid of.
Exactly.
They're afraid of those people, but we're not afraid of those people. And you go into areas where people are taught to responsibly own guns. In any community, you look at data on kids that are hunting from a young age, and they don't have these problems. You always get deeper into these. So this is a long, deep analysis. And when you try to result in sound bites to make a point about guns and this stupidity of that statement by this governor, that was a stupid. Gun violence is whatever emergency. That's stupid.
Public health.
How about
emergency?
the VAERS information? How about the VAERS data? Is that an emergency too? But no one wants to talk about that. How about the vaccine adverse events reporting system? How about that? How about vehicle violence?
Right.
How about vehicle death is an emergency now? Alcohol death, that's a real emergency. Fentanyl death, nobody wants to talk about that. The fentanyl deaths far outweigh the gun deaths, including suicide. So we'll continue these conversations, guys, on the After Show, Facebook Live. Thank you for joining in. You can always share this on iHeartRadio, right, the app.
Absolutely.
Or you can go to, sidebartv.com. I'm going to do my solo voice. Go to sidebartv.com. Solo. And join us on Facebook Live, guys. God bless you. Have a great weekend.
The proceedings. Okay, George, you're the one. You said you wanted to follow up.
Well, I mean, Nico just said so many good things, really about the responsibility that we have to understand what's really at play. The pretext, and to understand what it is that we're fighting for. And I don't know, it just occurred to me to quote Ronald Reagan. Which I think summarized some of the sentiments that Nico was espousing to. Quote, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States where men were free.
That's deep.
It makes me so
That's
emotional
deep.
when
That's
I
deep.
hear things like that,
That's
thinking
true,
that
though.
it's a possibility.
It's true.
And I rue that day. I just refuse to sit on my ass waiting for that day to waltz in. I just refuse to. I just have such an enormous gratitude for this country and, and the peace and the opportunity that's afforded me and my family. I just think it's grotesque. It's inconceivable that I wouldn't spend, the air in my lungs that God has given me, doing what I can to preserve it for my kids and for their kids.
But we got to all do it. I mean, everyone has to, whether it's going to a school board meeting, whether it's trying to influence people, whether it's to be vocal about ideas, and also be wise about it. Don't be a jerk. Don't be goofy. Be consistent. Be logical. Don't be tribalistic, right? Don't be tribalistic. Just be able to explain why we believe in what this country is about. Study a little bit. How about that? You got to do a little bit of studying.
Yes.
Understand our rights. Persuade, be persuasive, litigate for the ideas that undergird this country and convince people. It's all about persuasion. If you're not trying to persuade somebody by being vocal and being reasonable and being logical and being, approachable, then they're persuading you. And if you self-censor yourself, they won. Their persuasion outweighed your persuasion. So being silent is not an option anymore. I've said that over and over again. We've tried to engage and encourage the church to stand up and pastors to stand up to speak up. And we need to. I mean, we go to a church that responsibly does that. We go to Hillside with Pastor Dave Tooker. I'm dear friends with Ed Newton from CBC, and he's doing the same thing. I was with him last night. I mean, I'm very proud of what they're doing because that's a huge church. We know. I mean, I don't attend Cornerstone, but the Haggies have done that. Now their style is different, and everyone's got different styles, and that's fine. I mean, you got to be effective with it, but they've been speaking up, and there's other people. We have Charles Flowers, a pastor friend of ours. I mean, he's been bold about things, and there's others. I'm not trying. This is not a kind of an exhaustive list. I'm just saying there's others. But the church needs to do that too. Needs to teach and train and raise people up and give them, kind of fill their quiver with information so you know what you believe. And even if someone's not a Christian, I mean, just to understand good foundational principles of this country. Look, we've got to start persuading people. I'm telling you right now, when I was fascinated to see a video where they shouted down the DA in Bexar County. First of all, he started off arrogant. You voted me in twice and blah, 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 this other bullshit. And again, not looking at the data that you didn't win by any more than anybody else won. I mean, the person that spent $2 on their campaign and you spending all of George Soros' money on your campaign, you won by the same margin. That's it.
Yeah.
So enough with the self,
bloating.
Bloating. Thank you. I was going to say self-bloating. And then here's on a predominantly quote unquote Democrat side of town with a lot of this is not about platforms anymore. This is about ideas. We're not safe. We're not getting justice. Things aren't moving along in the justice system. You have 25 to 30 positions that can't be filled. And I said this in interviews. Not only did I have a waiting list of people that wanted to work at the DA's office, my predecessor, Susan Reed, had a waiting list.
Yep.
To be fair.
Yeah, I get it.
And we're not friends. I'm just being honest. I mean, to be fair, had a waiting list also. But you don't, and you even got people, quote unquote, raises because you're just trying to make every excuse in the book. And Commissioner's Court said, shit, give him some money, I guess. Like, that's your problem. Well, now what? I mean, so now people are waking up saying, okay, we got to get past these labels and start talking about ideas that are affecting us. The borders the homelessness is affecting us. I
Big
mean,
time. Yeah.
the trash. I mean, why isn't the city picking up trash? I mean, it's the dirty windows analogy in New York City that Giuliani used to talk about. If you leave your bed, you leave your room messy. If you let everything go, look like shit everywhere. Oops. Oh, you got earphones on. Look like crap everywhere. Then you're gonna act like that.
Yeah,
We've got to take care of our city, and our families, and I support people to disagree. I love disagreement. I think it's healthy.
as long as you express it the right way. I want to protect people's right to disagree with me. I do, and I mean that. I represent people that I am ideologically opposite to. I love the idea. I mean, Dan Cogdale, who's representing Ken Paxton, and I'm not taking a position on it now. I mean, I have thoughts about it now that the closing arguments have been made and all the evidence has been presented to the jury. I believe Tony Busby ran as a Democrat too. This isn't about party politics. I mean, Dan says, and I know Dan because we work on some cases together. He says, look, my wife is real critical of you. Sorry, she's not a fan. I mean, he just said it. I mean, which is true. I mean, this is not about the partisanship of the platform. This is about the ideas that we want to govern our families. And so we've really got to get deeper into this stuff, and we've really got to fight for our kids' minds. I mean, children these days and young people these days are clueless, and they're delusional. And I'm not saying that to cut them down. They've been infused, I like using the word infused, with ideas that are damaging this country. We got to fight for them.
How do you follow that?
Well, it makes me sad because
Call to action.
no, it's true, and things shouldn't be along party lines, but they are. They are, and that's how people get away with things like the Bexar County DA right now. That's how he gets away with things.
You know, I wonder if the New Mexico order had occurred in Texas, and let's say Albuquerque was San Antonio. I wonder what the sheriff's response would be relative to the sheriff's response in New Mexico. The sheriff there said, I have reservations regarding this order. You think? He said the temporary ban challenges the foundation of our Constitution, which I swore an oath to uphold. So I'm not going to enforce this order. I wonder if the same thing would happen
But
here
don't you think
in
the
San
police
Antonio. I
chief
certainly hope so.
basically did the same thing in San Antonio? I mean, there was no big fight.
Over what?
Over what's happening and them blaming the open carry. I mean, he wasn't strong enough. I didn't think to say, are you kidding?
He's picking and choosing his battles.
You want a more strong condemnation?
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
but he's picking and choosing his battles because then he's going to think, because he's political on this too, that if more things happen, then it's like, well, you're the one encouraging. I'm not encouraging anything. People have a right to carry, to legally carry, follow the law and carry. There's always going to be abuse. Again, we don't do that. You know how many people abuse cars? I mean, people get in accidents. So someone ran into my wife yesterday and didn't stop. A truck, an 18-wheeler, didn't stop.
Yeah.
It just kept driving.
But that's the
an abuse.
lawlessness that's going on.
I mean, there's things that people abuse alcohol. People abuse prescription drugs, opioids. That wasn't some dumbass named Fulano on the corner selling drugs. These were doctors prescribing it. Sorry, it is what it is, and it's not what it's not. So things get abused all the time. Is that, this is my question. Is that the standard you want to set? That if you abuse something, we cancel it? Tell me right now. So if you abuse your wife, you abuse this, I'm not talking about physically, I'm saying just emotionally, anything. Is that the standard we're going to use? I mean, if it is, then everything's in danger. And so
Ideas. Comes down to ideas again.
100%.
I mean, pro no cash bail and smash and grab ideas. Are they really great? How are they working out for us? Because as from where I sit, they've turned once great American cities into war zones. And the chaos is unprecedented. So, and then when these issues are raised, they simply turn a blind eye to it. And like Nico said, they blame paper tigers. They blame fake perpetrators, and they blow off the real ones. And how long can that continue until you reach a point of no return?
And how long can you watch a video about it, a smash and grab in Los Angeles, before it's here?
Or a woman pushing her baby in a stroller and getting run over.
Oh no, but then they persecute. Then they prosecute people who are engaged in constitutionally protected self-defense.
Exactly.
So now you not only let the bad guys go free, but you persecute the people who are simply, operating in under the Constitution.
Or a daddy that stands across the street from an abortion clinic, just praying, taking his 12-year-old son. Then some unhinged maniac comes across the street yelling at him and his kid, "Hey, get away from my kid! F you, all this other stuff. Get away from my kid." He gets in his kid's in an unsafe space. She shoves him, doesn't punch him, even though I think punching would have been justified from what I've read, but shoves him. Local police say, "Are you kidding me? No, he's got every right to defend his boy. You were in a space, you didn't have to wait for his kid to get hit or punched or whatever, spit on. And then the local DA, the local prosecutor said, we're not prosecuting this case, but the feds come in and prosecute that?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? I mean, this is the kind of, this is what we need to wake up.
Yeah.
We need to wake up. And we need it to, and maybe this is the after show now. We didn't talk about it in the radio. I mean, the Ken Paxton stuff. I mean, I'm not here supporting Ken Paxton per se. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I heard and that I saw the evidence that is questionable. The question we have to ask, I mean, so there's illegal behavior, there's immoral behavior, there's unethical behavior. And then we have to say, what is the standard we want to use to circumvent the will of voters and remove somebody from office? Period, end of story to me. I've met Attorney General Paxton before. I don't know him at all. I mean, as a person, I mean, we've had text messages. We've had to work together on certain things when I was in office. And I've had a meeting with him one time. But that's it. And there's things that I mean, obviously his infidelity and his wife, I mean, I don't support that biblically. I get that. I mean, I'm not saying he's condemned. I mean, he can repent from that. And I don't know if he has. That's between him, God, and his wife. But I mean, you have to say, okay, what we heard, was it enough to rise to the level of an impeachment? And is that the standard we want? I mean, look, I mean, if you can't watch all of it. I didn't watch all of it. I try to watch. This trial I've watched more than any other trial. I did, because of the political implications of it. I did. I watched more than anything, and because I'm a trial lawyer and I'm just critiquing people and style and things of that nature. But at least watch the closing arguments. That's it. Just watch the closing. I mean, that doesn't mean that that's their summation. It's not evidence. So you got to keep that in mind. But still, at least watch the closing arguments. And you just have to ask yourself, I would have done things a little bit differently. Tony Busby's a very good lawyer, excellent lawyer. So is Dan Cogdell. I would have handled things a little bit differently, in the sense that I would have challenged the Democrats in the Senate. Can we have one of you step outside the tribe? Will we have one of you step outside the tribe, the lawyers especially, that understand the standards and know what you deal with every day, and the accusations your clients face and the litigation you're involved in. And would you apply the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt, not preponderance of evidence, which is a civil standard, the highest standard in our justice system, the standard that we use to take away someone's liberty and put them in a cell or label them a convicted villain? Is that the standard? I humbly, I wouldn't have been so angry. I understand Tony Busby's anger, but that puts people off. You just really have to understand your audience. I'd be shocked if any Democrat votes not to impeach him.
Yeah.
And so they were, and you saw Tony was really playing. Mr. Busby was playing to the Republicans. Biden's policies. I mean, you're just having the Democrats. He knew at that moment he's playing for those 9 Republicans. He's not even trying to get one of those Democrats. But the Biden policy, does anybody else trust the FBI, the DOJ? I mean, he just went all in, full-fledged, deep, Republican ideology, or conservative more. And so that was his style. Dan only had 5 minutes left and did his thing. And then, of course, the House managers did what they did. And so, look, I mean, this is dangerous territory we're in.
I mean, it's completely different, but it's not different. I believe it was a reporter from CNN that asked McCarthy about the investigation for impeachment of Biden. And the question she asked him is like, well, how can you go forward with this impeachment if you have no real evidence of any wrongdoing that Biden has done? And he goes down the list of...
Who did? McCarthy?
McCarthy.
Okay.
Goes down the list of everything that is now public that shows that there is evidence. And that made me think, okay, do journalists, do the media, do they just not know what's going on? And I know it's different with what's going on with Paxton, but the same thing, the blinders are on, and the tribalism is so apparent that you wonder, and you talk about all the time about, is this ever going to infiltrate the court system? Well, it kind of has.
Beyond a reasonable doubt is the highest standard in our justice system. And you have to erase all doubt that's reasonable from your mind. And when you say, gosh, maybe he did it, that's an acquittal. He probably did it, that's an acquittal. He most likely did it. or she most likely did it. That's an acquittal. When you're thinking of the standard beyond, now we don't have a definition for it. We have examples of it in the federal system. They have an actual definition. We used to, and it's been removed. But it's the highest standard. It's higher than removing someone's child from a parent. More than clear and convincing evidence. And so, I mean, and people don't really apply these standards anymore. You said, you know what, I think that the person did it, but the fact that I said I think is a doubt, and it's reasonable, so it's an acquittal. Does that make sense?
It does.
And so that's the type of explanation that we do with juries, and they need to understand that. And it's an ideological ask. And that's how I would have handled this. I would have said, I'm going to make an ideological ask, not a political ask, not an emotional ask. I'm an ideological ask, and I'm going to ask you to do an evidential assessment and apply this ideological ask to the evidence. You know, because I mean, there's text messages that I think were some of the strongest evidence to support the Attorney General Paxton. And again, for me to make a full assessment, I got to look at all the evidence, and I just didn't. There's no way. I want to see every bit of evidence. I want to hear every second of testimony, and I couldn't. But text messages at the moment in time, not after, not self-serving text messages saying, I just want the right thing. We need to find the truth. That's going into the mens rea. Now, look, were there things that he did that I would not have done, just procedurally processed, whatever, discretionary? Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have. But then that's stuff that needs to be presented to the voters and let them vote him out. But not for other people to remove. We got to be very careful. That's all I'm saying. I'm cautious, and I'm alarmed.
I agree with that. That last point, I think, is the hill that I would die on. It's not that Ken Paxton is above reproach in every manner here. We could conceivably look and say, well, I would have done it differently. I certainly wouldn't have done that. I mean, he really pushed his limits of his authority here or whatever. That's fine. The question does come down ultimately, does it rise to the level of impeachment? And that's why I think this is just saturated in political ambitions and political implications. And I don't like that. I don't like that. And Nico, well, you were part of the text stream. It was one of those things where Nico and I were just kind of going back and forth and trying to flesh this out. Just sort of asking rhetorically, what exactly is the evidence to suggest that there are political interests at play here? That there isn't some pure altruistic pursuit of justice by Dade Phelan, the Speaker of the House. Is this guy truly trying to do the honorable, just thing? And I call bullshit on that. I mean, I know the history, and it isn't pretty. If anybody who's following this trial, yes, the legalities matter a lot. Evidentiary rules matter. How that evidence is engaged with, the arguments are made, that stuff matters. But getting back to Nico's concept of mens rea, or the legal concept of mens rea that you brought up, Nico, motives matter, intent matters. There's a huge political inertia here, and we can't discount that. This has been going on for years. Ken Paxton's enemies are deeply entrenched. They're public. This isn't, I don't need a controversial mindset. I just need to read. If you notice the statements that have been made, you'll be able to more, you got to step back. You can't just focus on Ken Paxton, but you got to understand on the issues that have been going around Paxton for years. Ken Paxton's not new to Texas politics. I mean, he was a senator, right? He's been in Texas congressional politics for many, many years, at least 20 years, as has his wife. There's a lot of really bad blood, and there's a well-documented split in the House between moderates, a handful of moderates. I mean, I was able to count maybe 11, 12 individuals, and Democrats, to be able to basically stop any meaningful, truly conservative legislation. You pick a topic: election integrity, school choice, property taxes. If you're sitting back as a Texan and you're wondering why none of this shit ever truly sees the day of light as a truly conservative bill that actually keeps the state from moving leftward, if you're wondering why it's either killed or it's stalled, you can see the dynamic over and over and over again. You've got a majority in the House that is Republican, certainly senators that are Republican, and yet we can't seem to get any truly conservative bill out of legislation, enacted into law, and to truly preserve the conservative nature of the state. Why is that? And what we have over and over again since Republicans took control in 2002, it's a pattern, you can see it. You've got a handful of Republicans that jump over and they partner with Democrats and they basically push Democrat policies forward. Dade Phelan has assigned Democrats to chairmanship positions. These are people who are completely ideologically against conservatives, that the voters put him in.
All those, though.
And the blood between that contingency and Ken Paxton is thick.
That's a motive to think about why this may happen, but that's not the reason not to impeach him, right? I mean, I'm just saying that's a motive to consider what they're doing. That's something to consider their motives and what they're really, why they're trying to do this. So,
it's a reason to be cautious.
I got it.
Because what happens is that you magnify charges into impeachable offenses.
Look, in a defense, you look at someone's motive. So why did the child while the couple's going through a divorce claim daddy inappropriately touched them? And you think about what's going on and what's happening. Why is this person claiming they haven't distributed property yet? There's a divorce going on. There's a custody battle going on. Obviously, if this guy's a registered sex offender, he's got this charge, that would affect it. You look at motive. Timing matters. Motive, all of that matters. And then you take that and then you apply that to the strength or weaknesses of the evidence. I would say, even if you believe he shouldn't be AG, that doesn't mean that you impeach him.
I know,
That
but
means you work to vote on. Even if you think, listen to this one. This one's going to get you. Even if you think he did wrong, that doesn't mean you impeach him. Is that the standard? Are you going to tell me that everything that any elected official done is quote unquote right?
And that was basically Busby's closing argument.
No, it wasn't.
You sure?
But, yeah, it wasn't exactly that. No, it was.
He said if infidelity is going to be a basis for impeachment,
I'm not talking about infidelity. Yeah,
then a lot of people here are going to be in trouble.
Yeah, no, that was different. He wasn't. He said everyone is falling short, right? And
that was the lead up to. Yeah, everybody's falling short.
Yeah. But I'm just talking about if he did wrong. Look, we have complaints. We have governing bodies. We have like the state bar. Not every lawyer that does something wrong gets disbarred. And that's what I would have brought up in the closing argument. There's probation, there's reprimands, there's whatever else. I mean, what is the standard we're applying? I would have really challenged them on the standard that they're applying and the level of evidence that was presented. I mean, there was stuff that made you go, ugh. Even if there was something that's like, God, I can't stand this SOB. Guess what? You can look at him and say,
an excellent point.
I mean, that's how I would have handled it.
You can censor the attorney general, and then that can be baked in the next electoral cycle, and the voters can decide. But to impeach this guy?
No, but
Are you kidding me?
I don't know.
It's different, but I kept thinking the same thing with the impeachment of Trump and now the impeachment investigation of Biden. They're seeing how far they can push it, and it is along party lines. And so
100%.
But notice how the arguments that we're making are not partisan. I mean, if Ken Paxton was a flaming Democrat, we'd still be making the same argument.
I'd be defending him 100%.
Because you got to really be careful, man. If justice goes through the lens
of
partisanship.
Look, we represented somebody that was prosecuted by Ken Paxton's office for all that, voting and because there was that video that was out there, and I said, it's not what you think. And Georgie was like, George, it's not what you think. That's all I'm going to tell you. Context matters. It's interesting to get a 5-second clip because, Paxton was on the Trump train back then and was and he was in all this heat and he wanted to prosecute, and they found a patsy to prosecute and they were wrong. And it was embarrassing. And then they went to Kendall County and we had to go fight it over there. And then no one knew what they were, and then we got little by little chipping away at this case, and all of it was dismissed. And then they didn't have anybody to dismiss it because nobody was working for the guy anymore. I mean, so look, this guy does not walk between the raindrops, okay? I'm not defending him. I'm defending a system. I'm defending ideas. I'm defending, a standard that we're going to set for Democrats. Look, if this state, and I hope it doesn't, elects a Democrat, I want to remove that Democrat appropriately. Because remember, here's what I tell, how can you defend people that you know are guilty? How do you reconcile that with your faith? Well, Jesus not just defended guilty people, he died for guilty people, and he's in the redemption business. And so I want to walk people through a system that I want to hold accountable, make sure that they dot their I's and cross their T's. And then I'm hoping that they redeem their lives and then they, never come back into the system again, and there's true repentance. But that's you asked me a spiritual, a faith question, that's my faith answer. But it's not about the person sometimes. It's about the system. Because I always tell people there's 3 aspects to justice. Number 1, are you pointing at the right person? That's the one we always focus on. Number 2, did you get there the right way? Due process, fundamental fair play. And 3, is the punishment, appropriate for the allegation? That's justice. But then number 2, if we allow the government to get to the guilty people, because they're guilty anyway, what the hell do we give a shit? If we allow the government to get to the guilty people and cut corners, then guess what they can do to the innocent person?
Same thing.
They can cut corners. If they can get to the Democrat easy or the Republican easy, then guess what? They can get to the Democrat or Republican easy. And so it's truly a blindfold. I mean, that's why I'm so passionate about the ideas and that blindfold staying on. And when I was in office, you can ask anybody that worked with me, around me, I kept that blindfold on, and it wasn't made out of mesh. And you have to do that. I mean, I've represented people that I completely disagree with ideologically, and believe it or not, I know that I don't like. And that's not a matter. Just like the surgeon in the ER may not like the person that they're operating on, but they still have a duty and oath to save that person's life. And so it's a lot deeper for me.
I guess
it's a lot
that's
deeper for me.
It is. And I can tell when you talk about it, I mean, you're intense about it because you've had to live through it. But I guess what I'm saying is that I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical that the political ambitions and political issues here aren't so potent and so strong that none of what you just said actually matters to these individuals. And that's worrisome. It really is. And I think we need to just kind of peel the layers back and recognize this isn't something that started a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, when they announced they were going to impeach. This goes back years and years and years. It's been building up, and it's been rather public, and the things they've said about each other are pretty intense. And there's no question, there's zero question that Ken Paxton has been probably the most vocal attorney general in the Trump era, and he's gone after everyone. I mean, the guy's not been bashful about it, and in the process has made some very ugly.
But you had some people testify against him, and you just have to deal with this.
Sure.
That believe ideologically like him. I mean, they're true believers. I mean, you know that the Democrat senators like, man, that guy, I can't stand his idea, but he's against Ken Paxton, and I'm against Ken Paxton. So my enemy's my friend. So, but I mean, and so you have to deal with that, and I would have dealt with that differently. I mean, these are not rhinos. These are not people that just had some plan. Hey, let's get into the AG's office.
Some are. I'm going to say some
I'm
are.
not saying. I didn't say
but
that.
some of the most glaring and most vocal are. Okay,
I know, brother. But
I know,
who?
but
Like who?
Well, his assistant attorney general,
Who?
Vassar, Ryan.
Okay.
Yeah, he and
How about Penland?
No, hold on a second. The whistleblowers that came forward are all being represented by a long-time Bush lawyer
Sutton.
who worked at the federal. I
got
understand. Okay, at gratis. Do we dismiss that? I mean, do we not consider that? Does that matter?
That's not what I said, so I don't know who you're talking about. But I didn't say that. I just
No, it's
said there's
related to
some.
what you said.
Well, listen to what I first said. I said there's some people that are all in with his ideology. I didn't say all. This is my point. I mean, we're making my point. I didn't say, I said some. Listen, some of them, and we have to deal with. They had to have dealt with that. I would have dealt with it differently. So do you call them rhinos? Some are. I got that. I didn't say that. I said some weren't, and so you got to deal with that. And I don't think they dealt with it well. And that's my humble opinion. I'm not being disrespectful to Mr. Busby, or definitely not to Dan, because I know him
They
well.
didn't handle what well?
I didn't think they handled the true believers of the Paxton agenda. I don't think they handled them well. I don't. You didn't convince anybody that was on the fence.
What's a way in which you should have done?
Well, maybe
should have handled that
they
better?
had their own standard. They had their, because they showed that they were wrong, or that they jumped the gun a lot. This rush to judgment and this paranoia of wanting to do what's right or whatever. And then when things didn't go their way, it was almost like the whiny kids syndrome, where you didn't go my way and you didn't do it my way, but there were no violations of the law. I would have hunkered down on that. And everyone was called rhinos. I mean, you just can't wear that broad brush. It's not going to work. I mean, I don't think you're going to convince. No one got convinced by that, because there were some on there that were not rhinos.
Obviously, they're not all rhinos. But what I worry about is that I don't want to disqualify that either. I stay away from rhino. I don't talk about rhinos a lot. Anybody who's heard me talk, I stay away from that. I don't like because it's too large an umbrella. You don't like somebody, what they say, he's a rhino.
Yeah.
It's bullshit.
I agree.
It's an excuse to not think seriously about things, and I think it's disparaging unnecessarily. I don't like it. It shuts down conversations. But at the same time, if you study this is fascinating. Texas politics is fascinating, particularly as it revolves around Ken Paxton. I do think that the argument for the rhino mentality, I think that's stronger here than normally. And I don't think it should be. Look, I'm trying to get back to motive. I don't think it should be dismissed. I don't know if that motivates some of Busby's anger or his suspicions, but I don't think it's without cause. And I think it's potent. And I think we're all suffering from it because, again, when it comes down to important bills, this goes back years that never see daylight. I mean, there's a deeply messed up dynamic, and it's driven.
But that lands on the seat of the Republican Party to put up good candidates and to educate the populace on what they're voting on.
No, I want to go further. I think voters are aware of that, Nico. I think they're frustrated as shit.
Well, they're the ones sending them up there?
I agree, but Paxton's there too.
Okay.
And a lot of this stuff's known. It was baked into the electoral process.
See, the House manager's argument was that some of this wasn't known, and that was part of it.
And a lot of people said, the retort says, give me a fucking break. Okay? Yeah, so 98%'s known, there's 2%, and that would have sunk the ship, except the 2% isn't materially different than the other 98%. Remember, Paxton had already committed infidelity. Now, there's some questions about whether he's repented or not.
That's not an electoral issue to me.
I only mention that because a significant voting bloc are conservative Christians. I mean, that has been a very powerful bloc for Paxton.
The reason why
if he loses that, he's sunk.
The reason why something like that, it's important to me, is because if you're going to break a covenant, a vow, and a promise to the most sacred relationship, because Paxton claims to be a Christian, and I'm hard on people that do that. I mean, I think that's using the Lord's name in vain, in my opinion. Forget GD, even though I don't like that either.
If you're using it for political gain.
Well, if you call yourself a Christian and then you don't espouse and do your best, not perfectly, really do your best. So, but that doesn't mean you can't repent. So that's why that matters to me. Is like when you broke a covenant to your wife and you lied to your wife and you deceived your wife. Why wouldn't you deceive me? That's how I look at infidelity.
No, but let's continue that because I think that's important. Because again, I'm thinking I feel the same way you do, but I'm trying to go to the electoral block issue because if he loses that, he's sunk. Paxton, he's done.
Loses what?
The conservative Christian electoral block, and these guys know that. This is an effort to detach Paxton from a very powerful electoral block. Personally, that's what I think is going on here. I do. Just like all the efforts against Trump to separate him from his base, which, by the way, have failed miserably. I mean, they've tried everything. And they're not done yet. Trust me. We're going to see a lot of creative efforts to do that. And I think that kind of spirit and that kind of inertia and that kind of motivation is here in Texas. Make no bones about it. And I think Paxton is a kind of Trump by proxy. I think you're going to see a lot of this stuff this is kind of a microcosm of what's been happening federally, in my view. And so I think this is an effort. And my point is, Nico, maybe I'm wrong. But I think a lot of this was baked into the last election. And I know the argument. No, but you guys don't know this one other thing. Yeah, but there's and this is kind of what's going on with Trump. But there's this other thing.
What is the thing? Because I didn't watch all of it.
The idea that Trump, this is an argument that he didn't actually repent, that he continued to have that affair. But
is that I don't think that's an impeachable offense.
No, I'm trying to say efforts to detach him. I apologize for not being clear here. This is an ongoing effort to detach him from his base.
Yeah, I'm stuck on the impeachable offense. I want the evidence for impeachment, the standard that we want to set as Texans.
I'm with you, but I think that it's a two-pronged approach. If they can't nail him now, they want to at least sow enough discord and enough doubt inside a very powerful bloc, which are people that actually do care about morals and care about the idea that, hey, man, was Paxton bullshitting us when he said he was sorry? And now there's allegedly evidence coming forward that he continued to have this affair and that it got more and more complicated and that he was enlisting more and more ways to hide his affair. Well, shit, maybe I won't vote for him. Now, if they don't do damage to him by having him impeached, I think they're banking on at least sowing enough discord in that electoral bloc that Paxton has basically done in Texas electoral politics, at least as it pertains to the attorney generalship. That's my view. And I think that's...
So I
think that's so potent here, and I don't think
you're saying their intent was not to win, but to make sure he was unelectable.
I think Plan A and Plan B. These guys are always they're always ahead of the opposition. I mean, they really are, and they're very good and they're networked. When you look at what's going on with Trump right now, when you look at the network and the coordination, multiple states, multiple attorney generals, there's an alignment, there's a coordination you just can't dismiss. You got to respect it. And if we were half as good.
I thought it was interesting that they enlisted Rusty Harding and Dick DeGuerin.
Why is that?
Well, because they're old school defense lawyers. They've defended, Branch, Vinny, and they've represented people that no one. And Rusty's more of a I think, and I'm not being disrespectful. They've as we all are going to get older, you're going to lose a step. Some of the other lawyers that were with him, I thought were sharp. There was two of them that really I thought were good. It was interesting because there was young lawyers on both sides. And I thought that the younger lawyers handled witnesses that I wouldn't have let them handle. I mean, when me and one of my partners, Jason or Jay, try cases, I mean, we're breaking up important witnesses, and we'll let one of our younger lawyer do something that's, but on the main ones and the main pieces of evidence and the main arguments and the main, I thought it was interesting, and some of the trial styles are different than I would have, and I really stay focused on.
So I got a quick question for you on that note. So after hearing and reading and listening to everything that you did, what do you think was the most compelling piece of evidence? Maybe the one that has the greatest shot statistically of making it over the finish line in terms of sinking. Because I mean, there's 16, right? 16 charges.
I didn't look at all the different.
I think there's 16 articles of impeachment.
Right.
And if he gets convicted on just one, he has to step down. So I'm wondering if you thought, what do you think was the most compelling?
See, what they were smart about
At
doing.
the impeachable level.
What is the impeachable level?
Yeah.
What is it? I don't know. I mean, it's beyond a reasonable doubt if he did any of these things. And so, I mean, going outside, because there were times where Penley and some of these other guys said, don't do this. This looks bad. Now they jumped the gun sometimes. They thought that this was paid for and this, and then he got his trust to pay for it. Then the other side said, you only got your trust to pay for it at the last minute because you got called out on it. And that's why you got it. But I'm watching the dynamic in bits and pieces.
Fascinating.
And it was fascinating to me, but I wish I was on the jury.
I know.
It's hard for me to make a full assessment because I really don't like doing that. Then going outside, getting that young lawyer to be, and he had Joe Brown, the guy who was a former DA, former U.S. attorney. But the argument is, you got this young kid that
Why did you go get independent counsel?
admittedly was like, shit, I'm just excited to be here, man. This is awesome. I don't know how to do a subpoena, grand jury subpoena. Mr. Wing or whatever Nate Paul's lawyer was, will you show me, can you go deliver this with me? I mean, what are you talking about? And then this is the dude, and then he was never paid, so it just makes Ken look like a dickhead. I mean, he never got paid for and he's out there doing this and not getting the right advice. But then on the flip side, from the defense said, but you really were concerned about this metadata stuff. You really thought that the federal government, who says the federal government can't do anything? Then the federal government can't do anything wrong. Are you kidding me? I mean, it was just this ping pong back and forth. I needed to see it in continuous.
I thought about that, Nico. That's so interesting you say that, because I thought, wow, if anyone has a cover in terms of their legitimate suspicions about the feds, it would be Ken Paxton. Anyone near Ken Paxton. So I thought that was interesting that Ken Paxton's history, not necessarily related to Texas, but just in general, kind of comes into this and colors the analysis a little bit.
I mean, there's that one guy, what's his name? That works for that organization that you really like. Lions Defending Freedom.
Lions Defending Freedom.
And he's a true believer. I mean, you're not going to call that dude a rhino. You're not going to call Penley a rhino. I mean, you're just not. These are true believers, but they could be truly believers that are wrong.
And had legitimate.
They jumped the gun, and then they got defensive, and then they followed along, and they're not used to standing alone because they're company men.
And all he said was that they had legitimate concerns about the propriety of the actions. They didn't say
No. They said there was illegal behavior, and then they couldn't define what that was. And then they brought in the first assistant from Hayes County, who was in the AG's office, and mob maybe and probably and could have been, and we were concerned it was. I mean, and Busby did a good job saying, like, we don't prosecute on maybe, probably. Those are all not guilties, by the way.
That's what I'm trying to say. Then it falls. Then it comes down a notch to basically a sense that this is concerning and it's impropriety.
But then the counter to that, I'm just playing ping pong here for a second. Then the counter to that is, I don't have to prove, the House managers don't have to prove that a violation of the penal code happened. That just makes it easier. So remember, you don't have to have a crime.
But hold on, I want to go back to what you just said. I want to see if what you just said now, what you said earlier, are related.
Okay.
You can't say, "Hey, I know there's illegal behavior. What is it? I don't know."
Yeah.
So it's a sense. Well, it's an educated sense because I am a lawyer and I do have a license. Okay, so if it's an educated sense, then flesh that out a little bit. And as you flesh it out, you just get a sense that he screwed up, and that it was improper for the office, and that this basically raises some questions about impropriety. Does it rise to the level of an impeachable offense?
I don't know, because we don't know what that standard is. Then they had this opinion. They issued this opinion. Then the opinion was shot down by the court. But then and then they're trying to cover yourself, and then you're covering your ass, and then you're trying to do this, and then why do you have a quote unquote burner phone? But that's not really a burner phone. It's an extra phone. Whatever. I mean, all this back and forth. I mean. And then they put on that guy. I don't know who they put on. The defense should have never put on the HR guy. He's Hispanic. The house managers dude, the tall guy, just tore him apart. He did it appropriately. He did it well. It did not.
What
look
exactly
good.
was the point of that
I have
witness? You
no
think? I mean,
idea. It was a mistake putting him on. It really was. Because when you put on your evidence, when you put on your case in chief as a defense, very few times do you put a case in chief on. You cross-examine the shit out of the government's witnesses. Sometimes you don't have to put on a case in chief if you've explained it all, because you've turned. My goal is whoever my opponent is to turn their witnesses into mine. And you have to be strategic when you do that, because you can make all the great points you want. If you piss off that jury, all your great points went like this. It doesn't matter. It's like saying you are what you eat. That's not an accurate statement. You are what you absorb. So is the jury absorbing the
Right.
great points that you're making? This is why I say everybody's like, "Hey man, we did a great job. I did a great opening. I picked a great jury. Look at my closing. Look at my cross-examination. Yeah, put it in a journal somewhere." And they're like, "I don't care. I didn't absorb it as the jury. All I care about as a trial lawyer is my trier of fact. If it's a judge on a motion or if it's a jury in a trial, I don't care about anyone else. I just care about the jury. That's my
Being
job.
a bully can change everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
it's probably a stretch. I'm probably putting you on the spot here, but what? I mean, this. So the curtain's closed. I mean, what do you think? What do you think the jury?
Brother.
How do you think the jury's sitting there
again,
saying, "What the hell just happened here?" Over the last
It was
7
apparent to
days?"
me when I listened to Tony Busby's closing that he was playing for those 9 Republican senators. He had aborted even trying to pick up any Democrats. And maybe that's right, but then he should have done that from the beginning, in my opinion.
And we use the jury term loosely here.
Yeah,
but
because
jury's
they're
not
peers,
fair.
right.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Because the idea, we were texting about this, the idea that this jury doesn't have
It's
inherent
real
political
peers,
motivations
right.
themselves.
Oh yeah, there's no
Give me a break.
instructions.
Personal.
They've been tainted for.
Yeah.
You can't change venue on this
Right.
one. They've been this.
Totally. Yeah.
I mean, Busby did a good job saying the media was wrong. 100 articles written. I mean, he really tried to say. Be careful of the world. He didn't say it this way.
No, but it's-
it could be you.
Yeah.
You don't think it's you, all you infidels. You know what I mean, that's
No,
what
that's what I thought was
saw.
really very
That's
effective.
What I saw. You infidels. You know, I'm a Marine. I see all
There's
you
going to be a lot of
infidels.
people.
Bunch of fornicators. I love this stuff though. But I mean, I wish I would have seen all of it, because I would really give you my opinion. I'm hesitant whether I saw evidence to rise. My concern is this: is there stuff that bothered me? Do I think that Ken Paxton did things wrong? I do, based on my standard of wrong. Is it a legal standard of wrong?
Right.
And I would have to shove. I mean, I think he did things wrong. I'm not talking about morally. I mean, obviously, unfaithful to his wife is spiritually, morally wrong. I'm saying, aside from that, I don't think he led his office well. I think he lost control of the people in his office. I do. Because how do you lose control of true believers? Even those couple of true believers. Something motivated him. I think his fear of this affair caused him to make poor decisions.
Absolutely.
I think he made some
Yeah,
really poor
absolutely.
decisions. I think he made some poor managerial decisions. I think he made some poor decisions as the Attorney General. And I think you have to acknowledge that. When you said, when Tony Busby said, there's a bunch to do here about nothing, I guarantee he turned off people. Even people, because there is
Yeah.
something there. You have to say,
Yeah.
look, there's something here. I get it. But number one, it's not illegal. We're the feds. 3 years, they haven't done anything. You don't think they want to indict
I
this
wish
dude?
he would have elaborated on that.
That's
'Cause
my
I
point.
know what he meant. There's much to do about nothing as it pertains to impeaching this officer.
didn't say
Or-
that, though.
No, he didn't. I wish he would have elaborated. You're right.
I think you got to
but
challenge people.
because he also condemned the infidelity as
didn't condemn it.
a moral failing.
He didn't condemn it. He just says he fell short. And how many of you infidel? I mean, that's what. I mean, he didn't really say, "Look, it's wrong." And I pray that there's been true. I would have said, and I know the senator's in here, and so I say
should
this.
have been more forceful about it.
I just think I would have said, "Look, let's just look. The elephant's in the room. Me, I go to people's minds. I want to checkmate their mind. I've actually said, please excuse my language. It's not against the law to be a bitch. You may think that about Susie or Freddie or whatever or a jerk. You may think that, but if we codify that, then many of our own family members are going to be convicted. I mean, so we have to separate that. And so I would say Senator Paxton is in this room. So I say this with great deference. I pray there's been true. I really do. As not Tony Busby, the lawyer, but as a human being, I pray there's been reconciliation for your family, and I know there can be, and I believe that that's been worked on. But aside from that, I mean, I would have. Those are the real
Drive it
and
home.
the people that are like, oh, these, especially those nine Republican senators. You've got to meet them in their mind. You've got to checkmate them. You can't guilt them into doing. Everyone's watching. They're all watching. You know, I mean, yeah, we know that, but you say it that way. I don't know. I mean, look, Tony Busby's an accomplished lawyer. I don't know if we'll find out when they come back with their verdict.
Fascinating. My guess was that about they're really just playing for a fraction of those senators, because I think 6 of them are.
Oh, geez. Sorry, Dom. I'm way off the reservation. I think that about 6 of them are pretty deeply entrenched for Paxson. Let's see. I mean,
but there's 18, so they need 9. They need 9 to vote for impeachment. So if you have 18 and you have 6 that you think, and I know why you're saying that because of the pretrial voting, but you have, let's say those 6 haven't moved, so you have 6 out of the 18. So that's what I'm saying. They need 4. They need 4 to say no.
Anything can happen, right?
They need 4 to say no. You need to hope that those 6 stood ground, and they need 4 to say no. But you have 4 that have said yes, at least to move forward. Doesn't mean that it's raised to beyond a reasonable doubt standard. Look, I wish I would have seen all the evidence. I saw a lot of it, but not all of it. And you got to see it in order, and you got to see it in context. And then we're not seeing the exhibits. I want to see the evidence. I mean, I haven't. They say, do you have them? The House managers have them. It's been admitted evidence, and there's a lot of rules of evidence. This trial was not the normal trial. It's just interesting. You don't have an impartial jury.
We're gonna have to wait for the movie.
no, you don't.
Let's see what
From
happens.
the get-go.
Let's see what
All right.
happens. All right, guys. Thanks. That's it. We've plenty of time to look, guys. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed this conversation. Please share it with someone you think may enjoy it. And if you consider supporting us, please do that. Go to sidebartv.com. Have a wonderful and blessed weekend, and God willing, we will be talking to you next week.